Mary, you better start cleaning before the turkey gets cold, the card said, sitting neatly on the polished oak table, and I froze, my fork halfway to my mouth. Thanksgiving dinner had always been my favorite holiday to host, a time to gather family around familiar dishes, cranberry sauce bubbling on the stove, pies cooling on the counter, my hands flour-dusted from rolling the dough, the smell of roasted turkey filling the air. I had spent the morning arranging the centerpiece with fresh chrysanthemums, making sure the tablecloth was perfectly ironed, every silver utensil gleaming, napkins folded just so, little pumpkin candles flickering in the afternoon sunlight, streaming through the windows. The dining room was set for 8, plates lined precisely, glasses sparkling, wine chilling in the fridge, the aroma of stuffing and roasted vegetables mingling with the warm scent of homemade pumpkin pie. I looked up from the card, my heart sinking, and saw Victoria standing across the room, her blonde hair perfectly styled, a bright smile on her face, chatting with my son Mark as if nothing unusual had occurred, her laugh light and practiced, while I clutched the edge of the table to steady myself. I did not move, did not speak, simply allowed the silence to stretch between us, the room feeling suddenly smaller, colder, each detail now heavy with meaning. The candles flickering as shadows danced on the walls, reflecting my growing awareness of what this gesture implied. Memories from past holidays crept into my mind. Christmas mornings where I had risen before dawn to bake cinnamon rolls, Easter brunches meticulously prepared, summer barbecues where I grilled and carved the chicken while everyone else enjoyed the sun and laughter. And yet here, on what should have been a celebration of gratitude and togetherness, I was faced with this quiet, deliberate insult. I set my fork down carefully, took a measured breath, and let my eyes drift over the table one more time, noting the little details that mattered so much. The silver candlesticks, the autumn-hued napkins, the familiar faces of my grandchildren laughing in recollections of past years, all the while feeling the subtle sting that Victoria's card had brought to the forefront, a reminder that even in the comfort of my own home, trust and family bonds could be strained, challenged, and tested. I remember the long hours spent planning this day, the grocery lists checked twice, the oven preheated for hours, the turkey basted to golden perfection, pies resting in their tins to cool to the ideal temperature. And yet now, the gesture of that simple card, neatly placed and unassuming to any observer, carried a weight that eclipsed all my preparation, a signal of control and disregard, and I sat in that warmth, feeling the cold reality settle over me, letting the room hum with the unspoken tension, marking the start of a day that was meant to celebrate gratitude, but instead had shifted into a study of silent power, observation, and resolve, my mind beginning to trace the paths of previous interactions, every small comment, every subtle suggestion Victoria had ever made, assembling the evidence in my head, watching carefully, measuring responses, noting habits and patterns, my body still poised, calm, as if the very act of sitting still could counterbalance the currents of manipulation swirling just beneath the surface, the autumn sunlight, catching the edges of the tableware, glinting off the crystal glasses, warming my face slightly. And I let that warmth be my companion, a quiet shield as I consider the next steps, the way I might reclaim dignity subtly, without confrontation, keeping my composure, knowing that the measure of strength lies not in words shouted, but in careful observation and deliberate choices, the room alive with the smell of baked bread, roasting vegetables, and simmering gravy, and I sat, breathing, steadily, letting each moment imprint itself, noting the expressions, the body language, the cadence of speech, the slight hesitation in Victoria's smile when our eyes briefly met, all pieces in a puzzle that I intended to solve, my mind mapping each detail, preparing for what had begun as a simple Thanksgiving dinner but had transformed into a test of patience, intelligence, and inner resolve. My fingers lightly tracing the edge of the table, the polished wood cool against my skin, my thoughts. Clear, sharp, methodical, aware, ready to respond in a manner befitting the years of care, tradition, and attention I had invested, and I told myself quietly that I would not be rushed, would not be drawn into hasty reactions, that I would hold the line of my own dignity. The room filled with the rich scent of autumn, cinnamon, and roast turkey, and I let the silence speak as loudly as any words could, marking the opening of a day that would test my insight, patience, and quiet determination. The house was unusually quiet after placing the car down, the soft hum of the refrigerator and the occasional creak of the floorboards the only sounds filling the space. I stood for a moment, letting the weight of the morning settle around me, my hands lingering on the polished surface of the dining table, noting every reflection, every tiny imperfection that spoke to the care I had taken over the years. The sunlight had shifted, casting long shadows across the tablecloth and through the lace curtains, and I could feel the contrast of warmth and stillness pressing against me. I poured myself a glass of water, the cool liquid sliding down my throat, grounding me, and I observed the room as if seeing it anew, the centerpiece of chrysanthemums still fresh, the silverware perfectly aligned, the plates untouched. I noticed Mark adjusting his chair, glancing briefly in my direction, but quickly averting his gaze, a subtle acknowledgement that he had noticed my presence, yet unwilling to interrupt the choreography unfolding between his wife and me. Victoria moved about the room, placing folded napkins beside the plates, her movements fluid and confident, a practiced grace that masked the intent I was beginning to discern. Each smile, each casual comment she made to Mark and the children held the faintest edge of manipulation, and I recognized the careful construction of appearances, the deliberate omission of me from their small exchanges, the silent assertion of control in the details of the household. My mind traced back through the years, past Thanksgivings and Christmas mornings, to times when I had been the orchestrator of celebration, the one rising before dawn to prepare the feast, checking grocery lists twice, balancing budgets to ensure everyone had what they wanted, yet quietly observing the ways my efforts were acknowledged or ignored. I could feel the accumulation of small slights, gestures unnoticed or dismissed, patterns that now emerged with startling clarity in the light of this card. The air seemed heavier, the warmth of the oven and the aroma of the turkey and pies a contrast to the cold precision with which I measured every glance and movement in the room. I sipped water slowly, allowing the calm to permeate my senses, letting my breathing establish a rhythm that mirrored the quiet strength I intended to maintain. I recalled conversations, moments when requests were subtly redirected, contributions minimized, my advice politely dismissed, and I recognized the continuum of behavior that Victoria had maintained, her careful calibration of presence and absence, acknowledgement and disregard, all shaping the dynamics of the home with a skill I had once admired in others, but now recognized as a tool wielded against me. I adjusted a napkin on the table, noticing how the light caught the folds and edges, a minor action that anchored me to the present, giving me the space to observe without reacting impulsively, the foundation for deliberate thought and strategic patience. Outside, the wind rustled through the maple leaves, a gentle reminder of the passage of time, and I reflected on the cycles of holidays, celebrations, and family rituals, understanding that each provided a lens to view the subtle power dynamics, the ways in which respect and authority could be quietly undermined. I allowed myself to linger in this observation, noting the shimmer of the wine glasses, the polished sheen of the turkey platter, the soft ticking of the wall clock, all ordinary details layered with extraordinary significance, each a thread in the tapestry of intention and control. My gaze returned to Victoria, the measured smile on her face now slightly less certain, a fleeting hint of awareness that her actions were being registered, cataloged, and understood, and I felt the first stirrings of clarity, the beginnings of a plan that would allow me to navigate the complexities of the family gathering with composure, insight, and deliberate intention. I acknowledged the quiet strength forming within, the decision to observe first, to act later, ensuring that each move I made would be grounded in reason and purpose, maintaining my dignity while preparing to respond to the subtle provocations with the precision and calm of someone who had witnessed, endured, and learned. The room remained warm with the scent of roasted vegetables and pie, but I felt a coolness inside, a contrast that sharpened my focus, and I allowed the moments to stretch, each second a step toward understanding, each glance a note in the unfolding symphony of family dynamics, as I settled into the quiet resolve that would carry me through the evening, poised, observant, and ready for the eventual reveal of truth that I would orchestrate in my own measured way. I watched Victoria move gracefully between the kitchen and the dining room, her movements deliberate, almost choreographed, and I noted each step, each glance, each fleeting smile she offered to Mark as he laughed lightly at some private joke. I did not speak, I did not interject. I allowed the rhythm of their interaction to unfold in front of me, observing the subtle ways she maintained control over the environment, guiding conversation, influencing placement of dishes, and ensuring that the flow of the room revolved around her without overt command. My hands rested on the edge of the table, feeling the cool polish, my fingers tracing the grain almost absently while my mind cataloged every exchange, every pause, every micro-expression, like pieces of a puzzle being assembled into a larger picture. I recalled past holidays, the way I had orchestrated gatherings with careful attention, the timing of the roast, the arrangement of flowers, the alignment of silverware and glasses, each element designed to create warmth and ease for my family. And I contrasted it with the subtle tension now, a tension that spoke louder than any raised voice or overt argument could. I measured my breath, the inhalation and exhalation creating a rhythm that steadied my awareness. And I noticed the slight stiffening in Victoria's shoulders when our eyes met briefly, an unspoken acknowledgement of the observation taking place. The turkey rested in the oven, golden and fragrant, its aroma mingling with the scent of fresh baked bread cooling on the counter. The combination filling the air with a comforting familiarity that belied the sharp undercurrents of family dynamics playing out around me. I watched Mark pour a glass of wine, his attention divided, and I saw the way Victoria leaned in, her words soft but carrying subtle insistence, guiding his actions without any overt directive. I reflected on the years of preparation, the countless meals, the repeated gestures of care and attentiveness, and I recognized the patterns of manipulation that had emerged over time, previously unnoticed but now crystallized in clarity. Each subtle move, each carefully measured tone, the way she adjusted the table settings, all contributed to a narrative that excluded me, a quiet assertion of influence that relied on my compliance and social decorum. I kept my posture straight, my expression calm, my presence unassuming, yet every observation, every detail, every nuance of behavior was stored in memory, cataloged for later analysis. The candles flickered, their light casting gentle shadows that danced across the walls and the polished surfaces, marking the passage of time, the steady rhythm of a family dinner that had shifted from warmth to observation, from celebration to silent evaluation. I allowed myself to be part of the room, yet apart from the current scheme, quietly aware of the dynamics at play, my senses alert to any shift, any subtle deviation, the slightest flicker of intent that might reveal the deeper currents beneath the polite surface. I considered the possibilities, the ways in which my next steps could be calculated, deliberate, allowing me to maintain dignity while quietly asserting awareness and understanding, the early stages of a careful plan forming in my mind, built on years of experience, attention to detail, and the quiet patience that comes with observation and insight. I sipped the water in my glass, the cool liquid grounding me, and continued to watch, listen, and catalog, understanding that control is often exerted in silence, in subtle gestures, in the way a glance or a placement can communicate more than words, and I settled into that knowledge, patient, steady, observing, preparing for the moment when quiet understanding would translate into thoughtful, deliberate action. The dinner continuing around me, the aroma of the meal wrapping the room in warmth. While inside I maintained a cool clarity, a readiness to act when the time was right, aware, perceptive, and composed. I observed the way the family moved through the dining room, every gesture and glance seeming perfectly natural to them, yet laden with subtle cues that revealed intentions. Mary, I reminded myself, This is about watching, understanding, not reacting hastily. The pumpkin pie sat untouched on its cooling rack, the cinnamon scent mingling with the roasted turkey, a familiar warmth contrasting the tension lingering in the room. Victoria adjusted the centerpiece slightly, as if nudging the balance of power, her smile casual but precise, her words directed at Mark with soft insistence that made him pause mid-laugh, his body leaning slightly toward her suggestions. I noted the way the light caught the edges of the silverware, glinting on the forks and knives, the wine glasses reflecting the afternoon sunlight, each shimmer a marker in the quiet observatory I had claimed for myself. I remembered prior Thanksgivings, the laughter, the careful orchestration of each dish the table set to, creating inclusion and warmth, and I contrasted it with the present moment, the unspoken exclusion signaled through gestures and minor adjustments that anyone else might miss. My gaze traveled across the table to my grandchildren, their chatter light, unaware of the tension threading through the room, a reminder that innocence often exists parallel to complexity, and I absorbed each note, each sound, storing it alongside observations of Victoria's precision and Mark's hesitance. I poured another glass of water, feeling the cool clarity anchor my awareness, each sip a moment of collected focus as I traced the subtleties of dialogue, the timing of interjections, the weight of pauses, the tiny shifts in posture that indicated intent, control, and influence. The room was warm, sun filtering through the kitchen windows, dust motes dancing in the beams, the table set in perfect symmetry, yet beneath the harmony lay currents I was deciphering, a map of influence, subtle manipulation, and strategy. I recalled the careful attention I had given to every detail in my own preparations over the years, from selecting tablecloths to timing the turkey, to the smell of baked bread and fresh flowers, a sensory landscape now overlaid with scrutiny, a lens through which I measure behavior, motive, and awareness. I allowed my eyes to linger on Victoria's expressions, the fleeting tension in her smile, the slight adjustment of her stance as if she sensed observation, and I cataloged every micro-reaction with precision, the kind of quiet calculation that comes with years of experience, patience, and attentiveness. My hands, resting lightly on the table, felt the smooth grain beneath my fingertips, the slight vibrations as Mark shifted in his chair, and I registered every small movement as part of the tableau, the silent narrative unfolding. I reflected on the rhythm of family gatherings, the way patterns repeat, how attention to detail can reveal truth, and how subtle actions build into a broader story of intentions. Each movement, each glance, each calculated pause became part of a mental archive I was creating, ready to inform measured responses later, a strategy of observation, of patience, of quiet awareness that would preserve dignity while revealing insight. The warmth of the kitchen, the scent of roasting vegetables, the golden glow of the afternoon sunlight on the walls, all served as companions to focus, a backdrop against which the subtleties of control and influence became increasingly visible. And I settled into this awareness, a calm readiness, attentive, precise, unshaken, absorbing the silent communications as the family continued their interactions, the quiet rhythm of observation my steady anchor throughout the evolving scene. I took a slow breath and allowed the room to settle into its natural rhythm, listening to the soft clatter of utensils and the faint murmur of conversation, each sound measured, deliberate, and full of subtle meaning. I traced the edges of the table with my eyes, noting the arrangement of plates, the gentle flicker of the candles, the polished surface of the wooden table reflecting the warm afternoon light, each detail a reminder of the care and attention I had invested in creating a space for family connection. Victoria adjusted a napkin at her place, her movements fluid and seemingly effortless, yet each motion carried with it a quiet assertion, a reminder of her influence over the evening, over the presentation of the meal, over the flow of interaction. Mark spoke quietly, offering small comments, glancing toward me with an expression that betrayed fleeting hesitation before he returned his attention to Victoria, demonstrating the subtle ways alliances and attentions shift within family gatherings. I observed without interrupting, allowing the conversation to unfold naturally, cataloging the nuances of tone, the pacing of dialogue, the rise and fall of laughter that occasionally punctuated the quiet tension. My mind wandered briefly to past Thanksgivings, recalling the smells of roasting turkey and pies, the laughter of children running through the hallways, the careful placement of flowers and table settings, and contrasted that with the present, where gestures carried meaning beneath the surface, a language of intention that required patience and focus to interpret. I took another sip of water, the cool liquid grounding me as I continued to note every micro-expression, every shift of weight, every subtle glance, understanding that influence is often exerted in silence. In gestures so slight they might be overlooked, yet they shape the atmosphere, the energy, and the perceptions of those present. I allowed the room to exist around me. The warmth of the oven, the scent of baked bread, the golden hue of sunlight spilling across the floor, while my mind remained alert, attentive to the signals, the undercurrents, the unspoken dynamics that determined the flow of interaction. Each movement by Victoria, each small adjustment by Mark, each sound of silverware or glass, was cataloged, stored for reflection and consideration, forming a mental map of the evening, a record of control, influence, and positioning. I noticed how Victoria's smile sometimes faltered for a split second when she thought I was not observing, how her posture shifted ever so slightly when attention was directed elsewhere, signals that might escape notice in a casual glance, but were clear to someone attuned to the subtleties of human behavior. I considered the patterns of past gatherings, the ways in which roles had been established, maintained, or challenged, and I recognized that the quiet patience I maintained was my strongest tool, allowing me to observe without compromising composure, to understand without revealing alarm or judgment. I watched the light move across the table, the shadows lengthening as the sun dipped lower, each moment an opportunity to deepen understanding, to perceive strategy, to anticipate the next subtle maneuver. I allowed myself to feel the calm of preparation, the clarity of observation, the quiet power of attention, knowing that each piece of information gathered in this careful silence would inform the steps to come, preserving dignity while creating the foundation for deliberate, thoughtful action. The room filled with ordinary warmth yet layered with complexity, the family gathering, continuing around me as I sat, poised, perceptive, and ready to respond when the moment presented itself. I took a deliberate sip of water, letting the cool clarity sharpen my awareness as the room hummed with the quiet rhythm of family conversation. The soft scrape of chairs against the hardwood floor, the clinking of utensils on plates, and the occasional murmur of voices filling the space between actions. I observed Victoria adjusting the position of a serving dish, her hands smooth and precise, the movements subtle yet commanding, each gesture part of a carefully orchestrated performance designed to assert presence and control without overt declaration. Mark laughed softly at something she said, his eyes darting toward me briefly, a flicker of acknowledgement before returning attention to the conversation, the dynamics of attention shifting in nuanced patterns that only years of observation could reveal. I allowed myself to reflect on past holidays, the precise measurements of ingredients, the timing of dishes, the way I had cultivated atmosphere and warmth through preparation and attention to detail, and I contrasted that with the subtle tensions and controlled movements now, each moment imbued with meaning beyond the ordinary. The golden light of the late afternoon filtered through the windows, dancing across the polished surfaces of the table and silverware, each reflection a marker for observation, a point of focus to discern intent and alignment. I noted the micro-expressions, the subtle tightening of lips, the brief hesitation before responding, the almost imperceptible shifts in posture, all contributing to a silent language of influence that Victoria wielded carefully and consistently. I let the air of the kitchen, scented with roasted vegetables and baking bread, anchor my awareness, a grounding layer beneath the attentive vigilance I maintained, and I cataloged every movement, every glance, every tone of voice with precision, storing them as reference points for understanding patterns, anticipating reactions, and preparing a course of measured response. My hands rested lightly on the edge of the table, feeling the grain of the wood, the smoothness under my fingertips, a physical reminder of the space I occupied and the stability I maintained while attention flitted around the room in subtle currents of energy. I allowed myself to mentally trace connections, noting the interplay between casual remarks, gestures, and the positioning of individuals, understanding that influence in family gatherings often operates in silence, in the smallest details, in the manner of leaning forward or the direction of an eye glance. I sipped water again, slowing my thoughts, observing the soft interplay of light and shadow across the room, the shimmer of glassware, the warmth of the oven, the faint aroma of spices, all forming a backdrop against which subtleties of control and presence unfolded in plain sight, yet often unnoticed by those less attentive. I considered the patterns, the repetition of behaviors across prior gatherings, the ways in which attention and influence had shifted gradually over time, and I recognized that patience, calm observation, and careful note-taking were the tools by which clarity and understanding would emerge. The room continued in its natural rhythm, laughter and comments threading through the quiet vigilance, while I maintained a composed presence, registering each nuance, each moment, each interaction, allowing understanding to crystallize, readying myself for the eventual strategic actions that would be informed by this meticulous attention, the warmth, the scent, the light, all elements harmonizing with the focus and clarity I maintained, poised, perceptive, and quietly resolute. I remained seated, my hands lightly touching the edges of the table, observing the gentle sway of sunlight as it moved across the room, noting the subtle shifts in expressions and posture around me. Victoria continued to engage Mark and the children with effortless charm, her laughter soft but deliberate, the cadence of her speech measured, designed to draw attention and influence without any overt display of authority. I allowed my mind to drift through the past, recalling years of careful planning for family gatherings, the sense of roasted turkey, baked bread, and cinnamon filling the kitchen, the rhythmic motions of arranging plates and silverware, moments of laughter and shared stories, all forming a backdrop against which the present moment revealed a pattern of silent manipulation. I sipped my water slowly, the cool clarity settling in my chest, grounding my awareness as I tracked the micro-movements, the tilt of Victoria's head, the fleeting glance toward me, the slight hesitation in Mark's response to her questions. I cataloged these behaviors silently, noting the consistency of patterns, the subtle cues of control, the ways in which influence is exerted through gestures, tone, and placement rather than spoken command. The room hummed with ordinary sounds, the scrape of a chair leg, the soft murmur of conversation, the clinking of cutlery against plates, but beneath the surface, I perceived the currents of intention and the quiet assertions of dominance. I traced the arcs of past interactions, identifying small moments where patience had been tested, where influence had shifted subtly, and I understood that observation and calm awareness were my strongest tools, allowing me to maintain presence and dignity while decoding the dynamics at play. I adjusted a napkin with deliberate care, the simple motion anchoring me to the moment, a quiet assertion of attention and control over my own space within the room. My gaze swept the table, noting reflections in the wine glasses, the shimmer on the silverware, the delicate shadows cast by the flickering candles, each detail a point of focus, a data point in the mental map I was constructing. I acknowledged the continuity of family rituals, the familiar rhythms of gathering and conversation, the repetition of gestures that now revealed patterns of intent, and I allowed the awareness of these details to solidify a calm resolve, a readiness to act when the proper moment arrived. The scent of roasted vegetables and pie mingled with the warmth of the afternoon light, contrasting with the quiet tension under the surface. And I let the sensory cues reinforce focus, alertness, and clarity of thought. I continued to observe, measure, and internalize, each movement cataloged, each expression noted, forming a comprehensive understanding of the dynamics, the subtleties, and the unspoken communication that defined the room. I felt the weight of years of preparation, attention, and care forming a foundation of calm authority within me, a readiness to respond with measured action, to navigate the evening with composure and insight, and I remained poised, patient, and perceptive, fully immersed in the unfolding interplay, aware of each nuance, each shift, each possibility, and prepared to convert quiet observation into deliberate, informed action when the time was right. I let the room settle into a quiet rhythm, the fading light of late afternoon filtering through the windows and casting a soft glow across the polished surfaces of the table and silverware. The scent of roasted turkey, baked bread, and cinnamon lingered in the air, comforting yet layered with the subtle tension that had grown throughout the evening. Victoria moved among the plates, serving with precision, her smile practiced, gestures calculated to maintain control over the flow of conversation and attention. Mark responded to her cues with gentle assent, his laughter light but carefully timed, an undercurrent of alignment that I observed and recorded silently. I traced the pattern of interaction, noting the micro-expressions, the shifts in posture, the brief hesitations before responses, all of which revealed intention and influence beyond the casual motions of a family dinner. My hands rested lightly on the edge of the table, fingers brushing the smooth wood as I absorbed every detail, cataloging behavior, tone, and gesture with deliberate care. I reflected on past gatherings, the deliberate preparations, the warmth of shared meals, and contrasted those memories with the present, understanding how influence and subtle control could shift the atmosphere without overt statements. The candles flickered, casting gentle shadows on the walls, highlighting the contours of faces, the careful alignment of chairs, the placement of napkins, all ordinary details now imbued with significance. I allowed myself to remain fully present, observing without interrupting, absorbing the nuances, the silent communications, the interplay of attention and influence, the ways in which small acts could communicate intention as powerfully as words. Each glance, each movement, each slight adjustment became data points in the evolving narrative I had begun to map, informing a growing understanding of dynamics, alliances, and subtle maneuvering. I sipped water, the cool liquid grounding me, reminding me to remain patient, to maintain composure, to allow the evening to unfold while I continued to build clarity and insight. The warmth of the kitchen, the aroma of food, the golden hue of the sunlight provided a serene backdrop, contrasting the careful observation I maintained, a balance of sensory comfort and strategic awareness. I noted the patterns, recognizing repetition in gestures, speech, and positioning, the accumulation of small signals creating a clear map of influence and intent. I felt the calm certainty that comes with careful observation, the quiet confidence that patience and attention would allow for deliberate, measured action when the moment arrived. The children laughed softly, oblivious to the underlying currents, while Mark and Victoria continued their orchestrated dance of conversation and gesture. I allowed the details of the environment, the interplay of light, scent, and sound to anchor my focus, reinforcing awareness and patience. Every moment became a layer of understanding, a piece of the broader picture, and I remained poised, attentive, and prepared, maintaining dignity and composure, quietly gathering the information necessary to navigate the family dynamics with precision, clarity, and a calm readiness to act when the time was right, fully immersed in the unfolding scene, each second reinforcing focus, observation, and measured insight. I sat back slightly, letting the quiet of the dining room fill the spaces between the soft laughter of my grandchildren and the measured conversation of Victoria and Mark. The afternoon sunlight had softened into a warm amber, spilling across the table, highlighting the careful arrangement of dishes and the subtle shimmer of silverware, and I allowed myself to take in every detail with deliberate attention. Victoria moved with fluid precision, pouring wine and adjusting plates as if conducting an invisible symphony, while Mark responded with gentle attentiveness, each action coordinated yet understated, leaving the room with an air of normalcy that belied the subtle assertions of control woven into every movement. I reflected on the collection of these small cues, the micro-expressions, the slight pauses before answers, the way the attention of each family member shifted in response to her gestures, and I stored each observation with care, forming a comprehensive understanding of the dynamics that had unfolded over the course of the evening. The aroma of baked bread, roasted turkey, and cinnamon lingered in the air, grounding me in the sensory familiarity of home, a comforting backdrop that contrasted with the heightened awareness I maintained. I sipped water, letting the cool clarity reinforce patience and calm as I continued to track patterns, alignments, and subtle influences, appreciating the rhythm of the room, the soft cadence of voices, the small movements that revealed intention without a single word being spoken. I considered the past Thanksgivings, the orchestrated meals, the careful preparation and attention that had always been my way of creating warmth and togetherness, and I compared them to the present, where influence and intention were conveyed in small gestures, in control of attention, in the placement of objects and the timing of words. I noted the flicker of candlelight on the polished surfaces, the reflections in the glasses, the gentle sway of shadows, all of which marked time and movement in the room, each element a subtle indicator of interaction and influence. My gaze followed Victoria as she leaned slightly to adjust a napkin, her movements smooth yet purposeful, and I registered the consistency of her behavior, the careful balance of charm and subtle assertion, the quiet authority exerted through attention and placement rather than direct command. I allowed myself to remain calm, poised, fully present in observation, absorbing each detail, each nuance, understanding that patience and attentiveness were as powerful as any overt action. The children laughed softly, oblivious to the currents beneath the surface, while I cataloged every word, every glance, every small motion, creating a mental record that would guide my own responses in time. The room was filled with ordinary warmth and scent, yet layered with subtle tension, a complex interplay of attention, influence, and observation, and I settled into that quiet understanding, allowing clarity to form, patience to deepen, and readiness to develop, poised to act thoughtfully and deliberately when the moment arrived, fully aware of the unfolding scene, attuned to every subtle signal, every intention, every shift in focus, prepared to convert careful observation into deliberate insight and measured action with complete composure. Explore the intricate dynamics of family stories as the elderly mother observes her daughter-in-law orchestrating the Thanksgiving dinner with subtle precision. Mary Thompson notices every gesture, every glance, and every slight pause as Victoria Johnson carefully controls the flow of the evening, highlighting the nuances of family stories that unfold in the warmth of a home filled with the aromas of roasted turkey, baked bread, and cinnamon. Each movement and expression becomes a layer of understanding, a key element of family stories that reveal hidden intentions and influence without words. Through careful observation, Mary discerns patterns of behavior and subtle assertions of authority, capturing the essence of family stories where patience, perception, and strategic insight define her experience. The ambient light, the reflections in glassware, and the gentle hum of conversation all contribute to the detailed tableau, emphasizing how family stories are often conveyed in silence, through gestures, and in the positioning of attention, allowing the audience to witness the delicate balance of interaction and the quiet power of observation that shapes these family stories throughout the dinner. Character 1: Mary Thompson, elderly white woman, age 65, standing full frontal view, wearing a modest, elegant dress, realistic appearance, natural lighting, serious expression, no cartoon, no CGI, no illustration. Character 2: Victoria Johnson, adult, white woman, age 38, standing full frontal view, wearing professional, elegant attire, confident expression, well-groomed hair, realistic lighting, no cartoon, no CGI, no illustration. Scene 1: Mary Thompson and Victoria Johnson face. each other across the Thanksgiving dining table, tension palpable, each holding subtle glances, indicating silent battle. The warm sunlight through the window, casting shadows over the polished turkey and silverware, every gesture measured, every expression loaded with confrontation, full frontal view, intense, emotional display. No cartoon, no cartoon, no CGI, no illustration. Scene 2. Mary Thompson alone in her cozy kitchen preparing pumpkin pies, the scent of cinnamon and roasted turkey filling the air. She arranges plates, carefully checks napkins and utensils, each motion deliberate, calm, focus, showing domestic mastery, natural lighting, warm and inviting. No cartoon, no cartoon, no CGI, no illustration. Scene 3. Victoria Johnson in her modern apartment, reviewing emails on her laptop, dressed in professional chic attire, a confident expression on her face, meticulous organization surrounding her sleek furniture, coffee steaming beside her, full frontal view, serious determination, realistic lighting. No cartoon, no cartoon, no CGI, no illustration. Scene 4. Both Mary Thompson and Victoria Johnson standing in the dining room, together observing a subtle provocation from Mark, the tension high, their postures alert, and calculating, the interplay of authority and influence visible in their micro-expressions, warm indoor lighting highlighting the intensity. No cartoon, no cartoon, no CGI, no illustration. Scene 5. Mary Thompson walking through her garden, early morning sunlight illuminating autumn leaves. She tends flowers, carefully reflecting and strategizing her next move, calm, composed, and connected to her environment, natural soft lighting, realistic details. No cartoon, no cartoon, no CGI, no illustration. Scene 6. Evening scene in the dining room. Both Mary Thompson and Victoria Johnson seated with a quiet but clear shift in power, subtle smiles exchange, the room warm, with candlelight reflections dancing on glassware, the atmosphere tense yet resolved, the culmination of observation and patience, full frontal view, capturing the emotional depth and subtle victory. No cartoon, no cartoon, no CGI, no illustration.